So what is Angular, and why would you want to use it? The simplest answer to that question is that Angular is a JavaScript library, but it's so much more than that. It's probably more accurate to categorize it as an MV star framework. If saying that doesn't tell us everything about it, at least we have some context, since we can compare and contrast it to some other popular MV star frameworks such as Knockout or Backbone. Although we won't really make any direct comparisons to other MV star frameworks, we will discuss things it has in common with other frameworks, and the things that set it apart from the crowd. Angular isn't just an MV star framework, it's an opinionated MV star framework. What is opinionated software? Well, opinionated software guides you into certain ways of doing things. Opinionated software has a vision. It may limit itself to solving fewer problems, but generally, software with opinions solves those problems with less fuss. That doesn't mean that there isn't more than one way to solve a problem with Angular. For example, take DOM manipulation. Angular wants you to only manipulate your DOM inside of directives. But with Angular, inside of a directive, you can use jQuery, Zepto, any other library, or even just raw JavaScript to manipulate your DOM. That doesn't mean that you can't manipulate the DOM from within any other piece of an Angular application, but Angular definitely has an opinion about whether or not you should, and it gently guides you into doing things a certain way. So, why should you use opinionated software? There are many reasons. At first glance, it may seem like a lack of freedom is a bad thing, but that's really not true. The guys at 37 Signals, the company which invented Ruby on Rails, have even written a great article on the benefits of opinionated software. You can find it here. In essence, they say, the best software has a vision. The best software takes sides. This is quite true. You will find that using opinionated software will make it faster to do things that fall within the vision of the software. When it comes to Angular, that vision is extremely broad. It is well suited to building anything from line of business applications to video players. In fact, if you are watching this video on your computer, then you are using an Angular application. But first, let's make sure that we understand exactly what an MV Star framework is. The M in MV Star stands for model. The model is where you store the data and state of your application. The V in MV Star stands for view. The view is where you actually render to the user the information that you want them to see, and the view is where you receive input from the user. The star in MV Star stands for, well, something else. In many common MV Star frameworks, the star is either a controller, or a presenter, or a view model, or even something different besides those three. In fact, some frameworks even allow you to choose one of those three, and don't necessarily prescribe which one. Now you may be asking yourself, which one of those does Angular use? Well, Angular uses a controller. So some people may call Angular an MVC framework. That would definitely be true. But in the web world, there are so many frameworks that fall within this categorization, but don't necessarily fit into just MVC, that this term MV Star is commonly used. Angular is an open source library built by the folks at Google. This gives us the best of both worlds. It is maintained by a team of highly skilled professionals whose employment is based around building Angular. That means that you won't have to worry about it stagnating because the primary contributors get bored or busy. But because it's open source, it can benefit from the contributions of the entire JavaScript community. In fact, at the time of this recording, Angular has over 100 unique contributors to its GitHub repository. Angular is also comprehensive. What makes Angular comprehensive? Well, let's take a look at a diagram. Angular handles the AJAX communication with your server so that you can both send and receive data from your backend. This data is stored as plain JavaScript objects, so you won't have to make any special calls like get and set when you want to update your data. Angular handles showing that data on the page, which you can do using partial templates or just modify the HTML DOM that already exists. Angular also handles updating the data, or model, based on user interaction, so when a user types into a text field, that new value can automatically be copied into your model. You don't have to wait for certain events. You can just tell Angular that a certain text box owns a certain piece of data, and it will keep them in sync. This feature is called two-way binding. And lastly, Angular handles routing, or moving from one view to another. This is the key piece in building single-page applications, or SPAs. This way you can completely change your view based on user interaction with your page. Angular will also update the URL in the browser so that the new view can be bookmarked for later. The next important aspect of Angular is its testability. Angular was built from the ground up with testing in mind. When the Angular team built the first versions of Angular, testability was a primary consideration. That means that Angular not only supports isolated unit tests, but it also supports integrated end-to-end tests. Also, a lot of the built-in objects that Angular provides have special versions that you can use to make your testing easier. In fact, testing is so critical to Angular that while building the framework, the team created a fantastic testing tool which used to be called Testacular and is now called Karma. This tool is used by lots of development shops to test their code, and many of them aren't even using Angular. Perhaps the one attribute of Angular that sets it most apart from the rest of the MV frameworks is the fact that it extends HTML by providing its own elements and properties, called directives, that are used to interact with your HTML DOM. Basically, Angular lets you teach your HTML new tricks. Imagine if HTML had been designed for applications and not for documents. That is how Angular thinks of HTML, and the ability it gives you to teach your HTML new tricks is a result of this thinking. Let's look at some examples of this. Here I have a simple input tag, but look at this last property. This is a custom attribute that I might build that tells Angular to make the element have focus when the page loads. What some of you may recognize is that HTML5 already has an attribute like this. It's called autofocus. So HTML5 is already thinking along these lines. The problem is that that property only works in newer browsers. A custom directive like this one can work in a much wider range of browsers through the magic of Angular. Here's another example. This time I'm being a little more ambitious. This is maybe a toggle button or possibly even a button that cycles through several states, but here I can create some kind of a multi-state button that works the way I want it to work in my application. In my HTML, all I see is this, but after Angular gets done processing this element, the browser will see the HTML that it needs in order to accomplish what I want. And finally, something even more ambitious. This is perhaps a display widget, customized to a particular application that displays users in a specific manner. I just have to pass in a user object using the user property that I created on my custom tag. And Angular knows how to turn this custom HTML element into HTML that my browser can render. Think of how this keeps so much of your view logic where it belongs, in your view. The last important attribute of Angular that we will discuss is how it is forward-thinking. Angular is basically supporting the future of what we will see in web technology in the coming years. And as that technology becomes more widespread, our Angular applications will already be built to take advantage of that technology. Let's look at a couple specific technologies that apply here. Remember when I talked about what HTML would be if it had been designed for applications and not for documents? Well, that's what web components are. Web components allow you to make truly encapsulated components and widgets for your page, encapsulating HTML, JavaScript, and CSS. You can look at this article for more information about web components. Another up-and-coming feature that will soon be supported by some browsers is Object.Observe. This technology lets you watch an object or a property on a JavaScript object for changes and react to those changes. Most MV frameworks make you stick your data into special structures and call methods whenever you want to read or write to that data. Because Angular doesn't do that, it can support Object.Observe when it becomes widely available, and Angular will simply benefit from the performance improvements of having things handled by faster, lower-level code. You can read more about Object.Observe at this URL here. Now, one of the last things I want to do is take a quick look at Angular's official site. You can see it right here in my browser, and there's actually a lot of content on there. On the home page, there's a lot of introductory text about it. There's this Learn section which has links to videos and tutorials and case studies, and a link to the seed project template, which we will cover later on. But a key piece of the Angular site I want to show you that you're going to use and refer to a lot is under this develop link, and it's these two links right here, the developer guide and the API reference. Let's look at the developer guide first. This page has a list of all of the concepts that are part of Angular. So anytime you have any questions about something specific to Angular, you can come in here, look for the concept, say we have a question about modules, come in here, click on modules, and look at Angular's official documentation on modules. Now let's look at the API reference. This page has a list of a lot of the very specific pieces of Angular. For example, a list of all the directives that Angular provides is given right here. If we scroll down a little bit, we can see a list of all the filters that Angular provides, and a list of all the services that it provides, and a lot of other stuff. So those are two pieces of Angular's official site that you ought to be comfortable with and visit frequently. Let's review with a quiz. Angular thinks of HTML as if it had been designed to do what? Angular thinks of HTML as if it had been designed to build applications instead of documents. What kinds of tests does Angular support? Angular supports both unit tests and integrated end-to-end tests. Name one of the ways that Angular is forward-thinking. Angular is forward-thinking because of its future support for web components and Object.Observe.